Book 1, The Blazing Ronin, Wandering Blades. Chapter 7, The Shogun's Palace. The group moved swiftly and silently through the dense forest surrounding Lord Ito's palace. Akira led the way, his emerald katana seeming to cut through the shadows itself as he guided them towards the infiltration point Kozue had scouted earlier. The towering Ravager brought up the rear, his crimson armor gleaming dully even in the low light. Despite his immense size, the former captain moved with surprising grace, his kanabo maces held at the ready. Hana ghosted ahead slightly, her lithe form slipping through the underbrush like liquid shadow. The kunoichi assassin had taken point, using her incredible stealth abilities to scout for any potential threats. Keiya kept pace just behind Akira, her grip tightening around her sword hilt with every step deeper into the lion's den. The young woman's heart thundered in her chest, though she fought to maintain an outward aura of calm determination. Finally, Hana reappeared beside the Ronin, materializing from the night itself. She gave a slight nod, gesturing ahead with one hand. "The outer wall approaches," she murmured, her lightly accented voice barely audible. "The guard rotation has just shifted, we have a brief window to slip through undetected." Akira acknowledged her with the barest incline of his head before turning to address the rest of the group in a low murmur. "Remember, from this point on, we are operating deep behind enemy lines. There can be no mistakes, no lapses in discipline or focus." His piercing emerald gaze seemed to bore into each of them as the weight of his next words hung in the air. "Lord Ito's palace guards are among the most elite and ruthless warriors in these lands. They will not hesitate to cut us down without mercy at the first sign of our infiltration." The Ronin allowed that grim pronouncement to linger for a moment before continuing. "Kozue, Hana, I want the two of you to take point and neutralize any opposition swiftly and silently. Keiya, you are with me, stay in my shadow and do not break formation unless given explicit orders. Is that understood?" The three warriors gave terse nods of affirmation, their expressions hardening with grim determination. Akira held their gazes for one final beat before turning and slipping into the underbrush once more, his katana leading the way. The group moved like wraiths through the dense foliage, drawing ever closer to the looming outer wall of Ito's palace grounds. Finally, Hana held up a fist, signaling them to halt as she peered through the tree-line. Akira crouched beside the kunoichi, studying the obstacle before them through narrowed eyes. The wall stood over 20 feet high, constructed of solid fitted stone and crowned with wicked metal shards to deter climbers. A narrow walkway ran along the top, just wide enough for two guards to patrol abreast. As if on cue, two imposing shadows emerged into view above them, the distinctive silhouettes of samurai warriors making their rounds. Akira's grip tightened fractionally around his sword hilt as he felt Keiya tense behind him. But Hana remained utterly calm and focused, her eyes locked on the patrolling guards as she began slinking forward like a panther stalking its prey. Kozue followed in her wake, his footfalls utterly silent despite his immense size and weight of armor. The two assassins seemed to melt into the very shadows cast by the outer wall itself. Akira watched with bated breath as they began scaling the sheer stone face with almost supernatural speed and dexterity, using every slight foothold and imperfection. Within moments, they had crested the top of the wall, hovering in the shadows just behind the oblivious guards. The Ronin's eyes narrowed as Hana made a subtle hand signal, her lithe form coiling like a viper preparing to strike. Then, with a dizzying blur of motion, the two assassins struck as one. Kozue's mace lashed out, crushing one guard's skull with a sickening crunch before he could even raise a cry of alarm. An instant later, Hana's hands seemed to blur as she wove an intricate pattern with her kama scythes, the razor-sharp blades opening the second guard's throat in a crimson spray. The two bodies crumpled to the walkway, their life's blood pooling rapidly around them. Akira allowed himself a grim nod of approval as Hana leaned over the edge, gesturing for him and Keiya to begin scaling the wall. The Ronin went first, digging his fingers into the crevices and finding purchase with an almost preternatural ease. Keiya followed just behind, her face a mask of intense focus and determination despite her trembling limbs. Finally, they crested the top of the wall and dropped into a crouch beside their two assassin allies. Hana offered Akira a roguish smirk as she cleaned her scythes on a fallen guard's tunic. "Not a sound," she murmured, her eyes glittering with dark amusement. "You worry too much, Ronin." Akira leveled his emerald stare at the kunoichi, his expression unreadable even as he felt the corners of his lips twitch upward slightly. "Save your arrogance for when we're through the palace gates, assassin," he rumbled in response. "The real challenges are still to come." Kozue gave a low chuckle at that, resting his maces across his shoulders as he studied the ground stretching out before them. "He's got a point, little snake," the towering Ravager stated, his deep voice laced with dark amusement. "Lord Ito has more surprises awaiting us than even I could anticipate." The crimson-armored warrior leveled his intense gaze at Akira from within his fearsome mask. "I would suggest we move swiftly, Blazing Ronin. Before our presence here is discovered and our only advantage is lost." The young warrior gave a terse nod of agreement, rising from his crouch and turning to survey the path ahead. The palace grounds sprawled out before them, a labyrinth of ornate wooden structures and winding garden paths separating the outer wall from the main keep itself. Akira's emerald gaze narrowed as he studied the imposing central palace, its towering pagoda roofs and walls seeming to glow with an almost sinister light. He could sense the power, the wrongness radiating from that place like a miasma. Lord Ito and his elite were in there. Along with whatever ancient, corrupted forces the shogun had allied himself with in his mad quest for power and domination. The Ronin's grip tightened around his katana's hilt until his knuckles shone bone-white. He could already feel the flames of destiny licking at his heels, driving him inexorably towards the coming confrontation. This was it, the point of no return. Akira's piercing emerald gaze slid to each of his companions in turn, taking in their expressions of grim determination. "You know what we are about to face," he stated, his deep voice resonating with quiet intensity. "Lord Ito's most elite samurai, bound by neither honor nor mercy. Opponents who have fully embraced the darkness for the sake of power and prestige." The young warrior slowly drew his katana, the brilliant emerald blade seeming to shimmer and pulse with ethereal energy. He leveled the point towards the central palace, his expression hardening like chiseled stone. "Our enemy is corruption and chaos given form. But we are the Blazing Vanguard, united by a singular purpose to combat the ancient evils that threaten to consume this world. To be the guiding flame that cuts through the shadows and restores balance, no matter the sacrifices required." Akira's emerald gaze burned with the intensity of a sun-going supernova as it swept over his allies one final time. "So I ask you all again, are you ready to walk the path of the Blazing Ronin? To brave the fires of oblivion itself for the sake of redemption?" One by one, Kaya, Kozue and Hana all gave solemn nods of affirmation, gripping their respective weapons tightly as they prepared themselves. The Ronin regarded them for a final beat before turning on his heel and beginning to stride across the grounds, his blazing katana leading the way. "Then let the ashes be seared from our souls this night," Akira intoned, his voice resonating with lethal promise. "For our blades will taste blood before the dawn." The group moved swiftly but silently across the ornate palace grounds, sticking to the shadows and winding garden paths as they made their way ever deeper into the complex. Akira could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on them, the inevitability of the coming confrontation growing heavier with every step. Finally, they reached the base of the central keep, an imposing three-story pagoda constructed of intricately carved wood and stone. Two immense doors flanked by a quartet of stone lion statues stood as the main entrance, currently unguarded. The Ronin signaled for his allies to hold position as he studied the entrance, his emerald gaze scanning every detail for potential threats or traps. After a moment, he gave a slight nod and began advancing once more. "Kozue, Hana, take flanking positions," he murmured lowly. "Kaya, you're with me. Once we're through those doors, expect heavy resistance from Ito's elite guard." The towering Ravager and lithe kunoichi assassin moved to obey without a word, splitting off to take up overwatch positions on either side of the entrance. Akira could feel Keiya's eyes on him as he approached the main doors, her sword gripped tightly in her hands. "You don't have to do this, you know," the young warrior stated without turning around. "Once that door opens, there will be no going back. No chance to." "Don't," Keiya cut him off firmly, her voice laced with quiet conviction. "Don't try to convince me to turn back again, Akira. I made my choice to follow you and the path of the blazing Ronin long ago." The young woman stepped up beside him, her expression hardening into a mask of determination as she leveled her sword towards the entrance. "So lead on, Ronin. And have faith that I will be guarding your back every step of the way into the fires of oblivion itself." Akira held Keiya's intense stare for a long moment, feeling an unfamiliar swelling of emotion tighten his chest. Then, with a slight nod of acknowledgement, he turned and gripped the heavy wooden doors with both hands. Taking a deep breath to center himself, the Ronin threw his weight against the entrance with a powerful heave. The doors groaned in protest but began to slowly swing inwards, revealing the dimly lit interior of the palace's main hall beyond. No sooner had the first slivers of light spilled across the threshold than a chorus of harsh shouts echoed from within. Akira's eyes narrowed as a dozen armored forms seemed to materialize from the shadows, their swords and naginatas leveled menacingly. "Intruders," one of the samurai guards bellowed, his voice laced with fury. "Cut them down before they can defile these halls further." The guards surged forward as one, letting loose a unified battle cry that shook the very air. But Akira remained utterly calm, slowly drawing his katana as emerald flames erupted across his body. "You had your chance to surrender with honor," the Ronin stated, his deep voice resonating with quiet menace as the pulsing markings covering his form flared to blinding life. Leveling his brilliant jade blade at the oncoming warriors, Akira's emerald gaze burned with the intensity of a sun-going supernova. "Now you will face the fires of oblivion itself." With a resounding boom like a thunderclap, waves of scorching emerald flames erupted outwards from the Ronin's form. The leading guards cried out in shock and pain as the searing conflagration washed over them, hungrily consuming their bodies in jade fire. Akira strode forward, his blazing katana leaving emerald contrails in its wake as he advanced into the palace's main hall. All around, Ito's elite samurai were being cut down and incinerated by the Ronin's incredible power, their screams of agony echoing through the cavernous space. Kozue and Hana materialized from the shadows to either side of their ally, the Ravager's maces and the Kunoichi's scythes whirling in deadly arcs as they cut down any survivors with brutal efficiency. Keiya followed just behind Akira, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation at the sheer devastation being unleashed. Within moments, the entrance hall was a smoldering ruin of ash and charred remains. The few guards who had managed to flee were swiftly run down by the merciless assassins, cut down before they could raise the alarm further. Akira stood in the center of the carnage, his chest heaving slightly as the emerald flames surrounding him slowly winked out. He could feel the power of the old ones thrumming through his veins, the markings covering his body pulsing with ethereal energy. "Impressive," Hana stated, her lightly accented voice laced with a mixture of awe and trepidation as she studied the Ronin appraisingly. "Though I shudder to think of what Ito has been harboring here that could necessitate such abilities." "You would be wise to embrace your fear, little snake," Kozue rumbled, resting his maces across his shoulders as he surveyed the destruction. "For I can assure you, the darkness we are about to face is far beyond anything in your experience." The towering Ravager leveled his intense gaze at Akira, his next words carrying a heavy weight. "We have crossed the point of no return now, Blazing Ronin. Ito will soon be made aware of our presence, if he wasn't already. We must press on and confront him swiftly before he can summon whatever forces he has bound to his will." Akira was silent for a long moment, allowing the weight of his allies' words to hang in the air. Finally, he gave a slow, grim nod of acknowledgement and began striding deeper into the palace's interior. "Then we make for the throne room with all due haste," he stated, his deep voice resonating with lethal intensity. It is time for Lord Ito to face the consequences of his transgressions against these lands. The young warrior's emerald gaze swept over his companions, burning with the intensity of a sun-going supernova. For if he will not renounce his dark ambitions and the ancient evils he has allied himself with, then I will cut him down without hesitation or mercy. This, I swear. With those ominous words lingering in the air, Akira turned and began ascending the main staircase, his blazing katana leading the way into the palace's shadowed depths. Kaya, Kozue, and Hana exchanged grim looks before falling into step behind the Ronin, steeling themselves for whatever fresh horrors awaited them. For they could all sense it now, the miasma of corruption and chaos that seemed to permeate Ito's palace like a disease. The dread certainty that they were heading straight into the maw of an ancient, primordial evil the likes of which the world had not witnessed in thousands of years. The path of the blazing Ronin was leading them into the very fires of oblivion itself. And only the strongest would be left unburnt by its searing flames.